extending access. That's what our strategic plan tells us to do. In terms of policy, the letter argues that our meetings room policy clause was misapplied, that WeBank's mission doesn't align with the libraries, and I want to engage that honestly rather than dismiss it. Our meeting room policy 3.4 in the policy manual governs standard room reservations and rentals, including a provision that allows the library, with my approval, to develop partnership agreements with organizations whose purpose aligns with the library's strategic priorities. While library policy gives little guidance to building closures and leaves a great deal of discretion to administration in terms of facility use for outside organizations. When our events team considers rental inquiries, our strong default, our preferred default is after hours use, and operating hours closure is considered only when after hours use is genuinely infeasible. Here's my view. A national convening that brought 4,000 people, thousands of women business owners to Salt Lake City, generated revenue for the library, showcased our main library as a city's civic living room to a large audience, both local and national, of women entrepreneurs, and as a tremendous community resource, the Salt Lake City does fall within a reasonable reading of our strategic priorities. Economic vitality, civic prominence, institutional sustainability all serve the mission of the library. While the event team does have a process that helps determine whether or not to move forward with an event rental that impacts public service, we did identify through this inquiry that we need to document that process. So I've worked with our operations team to draft a document that guides this process. It gives criteria around how we make that decision around a public closure, clarifies approval authority, clarifies patron notice standard, and documents limits of frequency. Creates a process for tracking that. Under the new procedure, the main library is limited to no more than 5 full operating closures for non-library use per calendar year, absent specific board concurrence, and each neighborhood branch no more than 3. In reality, the historical rate of the main library has been about 1 to 2 closures per year. I expect it to remain there. Those caps function as something not as a target. Last thing. The letter you all received was sent anonymously by a staff member, and the writer said that's because they didn't believe leadership would be responsive. I can't control whether someone trusts me, but I can control whether that belief is justified. So I do want to say plainly in public to you all, on the record, that if this—
On the comms front, on the procedure front and so forth, how you're implementing some changes going forward.
Thanks.
Any other comments?
Thank you for your transparency and for putting it on the record.
Submits a letter like that anonymously, they're fortunate that you are willing to respond.
Yeah.
Because frankly, when they even talk about how they're being honest, you just want to go, no, you're not. So kudos to you for doing that, and I hope whoever that is, owns up to it.
We want to assume positive intent of all of our employees. This person had a concern. I want to address their concerns directly, and that person and any staff member has a direct line to me.
But I think it's also helpful to have addressed it at this board meeting, so it's in the minutes, and now we are all on the same page. It's all above board.
Thanks.
Thank you.
People would have a meeting.
Okay. I'm going to turn it to my colleague, Tyler, who's presented a few slides related to the second item.
Hey, so I'll refer to these slides a little bit, but really thrilled and grateful for Noah's leadership. We welcome questions and appreciate the opportunity for dialogue. In my world, it's not trust but verify, but trust and verify every time. Verification and accountability foster trust, and it helps improve the quality of our work in the end. So today, we want to share with you an overview of information that's available through Transparent Utah, as well as some discussion about libraries compensation. So Transparent Utah is a website managed by the Utah State Auditor. It's an elected position, okay? And transparent.utah.gov is the URL. There is data that we have to report on a quarterly basis, including all of our revenues and expenditures for 3 months. And then compensation data is reported annually. So here before the end of July, will submit all of the compensation, that's wages and benefits that have been paid to staff in fiscal 2026 that just ended.
What is the reporting requirement? Is it like within a certain amount of time after your fiscal year?
Yeah, within a month.
Within a month?
Yeah. Um,
I
There-
know it's for all government entities.
Yes. There, as audits are completed, they've started asking us to update reports. So when the audit is done, we will upload a new file. But otherwise, it's within 3 months at the close of the period.
3 months.
Excuse me, 30 days.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. So this is data that's available publicly and can be very useful, but there are limitations. For example, all of our debt service and all of our capital expenditures actually show a price in the form of a transfer from the general fund to the destination fund and then the actual expenditures going in. So there's a little bit of nuance and understanding how the data is raw in the system to really make sense of it. So with that context in mind, let's take a look first at how the library.
Could you say that again? How the data's duplicated? Yeah, the double count.
So the library, most of our funding comes from property taxes. So it originates in the general fund. The $1 million right now that we are spending for debt service for Marmalade and Glendale is transferred from the general fund and then paid out of the debt service fund. So we see it twice because it shows up as a transfer, an expense out of the general fund, and then again, when those payments actually go out to the facility.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great question. That's a great segue. That's why we're focusing on here on this slide on the general fund itself, because it's really the most simple and holistic understanding of what's going on, especially operationally. If you look at this slide from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 25, I think I'd be a fool to try to convince you that $14 million increase is not significant, right? That's huge. So at the service level, that's something that really catches our attention. But there are some drivers that you really have to know what you're looking for in the data that's available on Transparent Utah to pull these out. So those include significant capital expenditures. If you look at 2019 compared to 2025, there was a $5 million increase because we were working on the roof. So for 2 years, there was about $5 million each that you wouldn't have seen in 2019. There were also pass-throughs. These are funds that are they're part of the property tax that are delivered to other entities. But legislature indicated that these entities do not have their own taxing ability, so they receive that tax under our and the cities and other entities' taxing authority. We never see those funds. We simply get a report that says, here's the amount. So we book a revenue and expense that offset each other. Net zero impact to our budget, but
Shows up.
it shows up, right? And it makes our budget look even more better. Another significant driver, digital materials over that time period, $1.5 million. I'm part of that opportunity, right? I consumed, I think, 4 different digital books, audio books over the last weekend. It was great. And we're looking this year, as Noah indicated, to see digital materials and that circulation outpace traditional materials. Factor in inflation. It was 28% if you compare CPI, Consumer Price Index. In 2019 and 25, that's 28%. So once we consider all of those additional factors, the net increase in our expenditures over this time period is only 6%. And that is reflective of enhancements to safety and security. We opened the ballpark branch. and other service enhancements, of course. So any questions about? Also on Transparent Utah, you can look up the compensation of any individual employee in the state of Utah for public entities. Okay, you go in there by name, or you can filter by organization. There's also reports that have the data organized in ways that the public may want to see. For example, the amounts paid to the highest compensated employees in an organization, right? You don't have to go through and manipulate Excel, and it'll spit it out for you. So this is a really small slide, but the box that's red has employee names, and this is the highest paid employees report. Employees' names, their title, the way that they were paid over that year, benefits they received, and then total compensation. Limitations on this data include somewhat of a lag, right? We're going to be reporting FY26 data here this week. So you can't see throughout the year how that's going. It also doesn't tell you if an employee has joined or left the organization partway through the year, right? So at one point, we had two different CEOs, right? And their salaries both looked a little small. That's because Noah came halfway through the year and Debbie moved out of that role. Also, title is an indication of position level, but it leaves some unknowns that don't really describe the organizational context. For example, you'll see manager positions in there for roles that don't supervise anyone, social media manager or some project manager roles. So you can get some indication of level of roles, but it doesn't tell you. So generally speaking, I can say the data available at Transparent Utah lends itself to specific inquiries about individuals or individual transactions. And then it's helpful to know more context if you're looking at it at a mobile. Any questions about that? Okay, I'd encourage you all to go test it out and go look up my salary. That's great. We do not discuss, right? We do not present folks' individual salaries because that's not appropriate. But the information is out there that people, if they have a specific question, can watch it. I think that's great. I don't have any problem with my salary being up. That's great. Any questions about that as well?
Is that the end of your
No.
presentation? Yeah, more. Okay, go ahead.
But I'm going to transition to some other information. So if you have questions.
No, I think I want to hear what, go ahead.
So in addition to Transparent Utah data, we also wanted to revisit some of the great work that's been accomplished over the last few years to competitively compensate staff across the organization.
Thanks to this board and its adoption of the current fiscal year or most recent fiscal year budget.
Right. If you don't recall, we recommended, and we're very grateful to your support and the city council support to invest an additional more than $2.5 million. And that investment was heavily focused on lower entry-level positions. So I'll share with you a few examples, and I want you to focus on not just percentages, right? Because percentages kind of depend on the denominator, but focus on the average hourly increase on each of these slides. So this is what was grade 11, library aides. Those are all part-time positions, but on average, those roles received almost $5 more. Grade 12, library assistants and passport agents, almost $4 at $3.79. And there's a mixture of full-time and part-time there.
I'll just mention too, before we move on, just as a reminder, we shared this, but the on the previous slide with A's, so that even though the recommendations of the third-party compensation study did not recommend that kind of increase, library administration's view was we want to get all of our staff to as close to a living wage as possible. That's what led to that significant increase.
Thank you. If these examples I'm showing you, if we were strictly going by that market study, the market wouldn't support any increases. So almost 5, almost 4. And grade 13, this includes custodians working their guts out, marketing and communications assistant, technology assistants, $3.85 per hour. Okay, so remember almost 5 and the other 2 almost 4. Compare that to other hourly increases for managers and directors. The dollar amount itself, not just percentages, the dollar amount itself for those entry level roles was higher than anywhere else in the organization. So that's pretty cool. Proud to work at an organization that's willing to do that. So.
And there was also the bilingual pay differential.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep, so 50
That's
cents.
in addition.
50 cents per hour for a number of languages, the dollar per hour if it's Spanish, right? So thank you.
That's not counted in the,
It's not, yeah. So if you look at that report, the top 10 highest paid employees, first in 2019, they were paid $945, almost $946,000. Divide that by the total regular budgeted wages. There's almost 11% of the total. If you compare that to FY25 and then FY26, let me see. So FY25, that's available in Transparent Utah. I threw in FY26 because we wanted to capture what we did at the beginning of, right, with all those significant increases. And that's not to say that there's any one right percentage, right? But really at the end of the day, the key here is that any assertion that the library's budget has increased disproportionately favor managers or directors is incorrect. The data is very public to show that. No secrets. I think that just is awesome that people can see that right up with this. With that, any questions?
thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you. My question was answered, and I just appreciate again your transparency and taking the reins back on the conversation and using facts.
Yes.
So,
And grateful to those who have chimed in, right? Those that have come and those that have asked questions. That gives us another angle to, okay, how are we looking at this?
Right.
And that's great.
And thank you for walking through it on that granular level,
Yes.
because now I feel empowered with an understanding.
Right.
You know, should the need arise, I can communicate why.
Right.
Right.
Thanks.
I can stand a little prouder now, and you know, when I'm questioned, like, okay, yeah.
So we want you on with that. You don't have to know all the details, but a little bit here and there, just like all staff, when it comes to the budget. A few things that you can really hone in on, and that will be very helpful for the library.
Thank you.
Those
Thank you.
reality. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for addressing those items. We really appreciate it. I have a very brief report. I wanted to share that on the point of Europe United, whose lease we wanted to approve last hour. They, as you know, are setting up shop in Salt Lake, and they held an event I was able to attend a couple of weeks ago, where they're spreading the word about their program, which is basically, so Europe United is a national nonprofit that aims to close the opportunity gap for youth ages 18 to 29. So these are folks who may not have gone the traditional, high school to college to employment route. They receive 6 months of training and then they're placed with employers. They have very high success rate. And so this was an info session that they did with local employers. It was super well attended. There were probably 30 organizations represented, a lot of interest in the program. And I'm just super excited that they are going to be here operating on the ground. There's so much need in terms of workforce and access to opportunities. And I'm very proud that the library is able to partner in such an important way with Europe United. So just wanted to share that. If you know of any employers who, could potentially be host organizations for Europe United interns, certainly trying to get you connected.
They're also recruiting young adults interested in the program too. So if you maybe know a young adult that's not necessarily college bound, but could benefit from a program like this, they would love to receive applications.
And I will say my employer, Morgan Stanley's partnered with Europe United for a couple of decades in other cities. And it has been an incredible talent pipeline for us across different functions, from technology to operations to data analytics.
Sorry, can you clarify how we could be helpful in those connections? Like my husband works for the HVAC union and the union reps could come and speak. What would be a way to?
So if there are employers who would be interested in hosting interns, the internship is a 6-month, it's kind of like a trial period for both parties, after which, typically there's an offer of full-time employment given. So if there are employers who would be interested in these interns, they could, speak with Europe United about that. That would probably be the best, but yeah.
We can
We can talk more, yeah.
That's a great one.
All right, and with that, I'll turn it over to you for your report.
Thank you, Soraya. We have, as part of my report, a large presentation with our friends from MSR. I've got a couple things before real quick but I will go through them pretty quickly because this work that we've been leading up to related to these capital projects is really important. We want to give it plenty of time. So we'll quickly go through the other pieces of my report related to some admin updates, program highlights, and upcoming events. And we'll turn it over to our friends at MSR after that. Just real quick on a MOU that we've been working with the Library Employees Union on. I've shared this with Soraya and the executive committee of the board already. It sounds like it is quite difficult, especially for an initial collective bargaining agreement, where there are just small little details along the way that you discover as you implement the contract that you need to make adjustments. So we have a side MOU that the union has agreed to already that I'm just keeping you apprised as we move forward with it. Just a couple of different things that basically benefit employees. One, in terms of deferred compensation. So URS, Utah Retirement System, requires certain employees that pick a certain selection to contribute a little bit. We had a certain percentage that the library agreed to pay employees to offset that cost. That went up this last year, and so the agreement says we're going to cover that additional cost. It's benefited employees. Bilingual pay differential, the way that the contract was written, it basically only applied to hours worked versus things like vacation and sick time. That's really difficult for our payroll, and so we're simply just, for folks that are eligible for bilingual pay, we're compensating them for all hours, not just hours worked. Again, a benefit to the employee. And lastly, around callback provisions for the library. This specifically applies to facilities employees that are on call. Moving forward, they will receive the same amount of overtime pay for both for a phone call lasting over 15 minutes, as well as a physical callback, like being brought back up the site. So again, in general, benefit to the employee. So the union agreed to all these things, just bringing this to share with you all before moving forward. Any questions? Okay. Scoot back. Just a quick update related to executive staffing. I think I've shared with some of you, but not all of you, that Daniel Neville Raven's no longer with the library. We've made the decision to, rather than rehire for that position, essentially shrink the executive team down to 4 staff. And I think you all have gotten to know my executive team a little bit over the years, and we are really gifted to have such a really talented group of people and feel really confident in their stepping into other pieces of leadership for the library. So I've asked Judy Moore, in addition to facilities, to oversee core public service, collections, and safety and social services. Judy just brings she's a deep library leader, veteran, and brings a lot of expertise in those areas. To kind of offset all those additional responsibilities, I've asked Tyler to, in addition to finance, oversee the IT department. Jessica Sweeney, in addition to overseeing the foundation and all of our fund development work, she'll be overseeing marketing and events. And Maggie Mason, in addition to overseeing people and culture, really as we really seek to implement the strategic plan, she's going to be responsible for really driving that process around tracking our progress and data, as well as we look to strengthen our work around library programming outreach. She'll be taking that work on. Any questions about that? Okay, just a couple of program highlights. I'm not going to go through all of the details in my written report here under the director's report tab in your board binder. So I really encourage you to take that with you, pull it out of your binder and bring it with you. There's a lot of great stuff happening across the library related to children programming this summer, teen services this summer. There's an update around Foothills Forum and some really great stories of impact. But a couple highlights that I wanted to lift up, particularly given if you've read Soraya and my letter at the beginning of the strategic plan, there's a really, I think, lovely image around the library, not simply as a provider of services, but as a platform and a catalyst. And so you may have seen that in terms of a platform, we were able to host free adult, maybe my video is not going to play. This was a video showing the Ballet West Academy, this fantastic, renowned ballet academy, providing free adult classes right out there on our rooftop. And I'm really grateful for Nancy Funes, our adult service coordinator, to make that happen. But this is simply community utilizing our space, right? So us serving as a platform for great things to happen. I think it's just a wonderful example of that. And then Soraya already mentioned this, but the library also as a connector, right? We are not simply just providing services, but we're helping connect people. And so this is just a couple images of those 30 organizations, 40 people, 45 people that showed up to the library one afternoon, talking about how can we support young adults in opportunities to earn decent wage-paying jobs that aren't necessarily college-bound. So just a really great example of how we can kind of serve to help convene people and connect people and service to the community. That's the crew from Europe United that was here from across the country. I also want to make notice or let you all know about a pretty exciting opportunity that the library, Salt Lake City Public Library, is selected for. I think you all have heard some new funding that the Carnegie Foundation is doing for library systems that have a Carnegie library. Our beloved Chapman is a Carnegie. And we were notified just a couple of weeks ago that we were one of 10 public libraries nationally selected for the Civic Makers Lab. The idea is that it's a program that equips librarians to serve as civic learning facilitators and empowers youth and young adults to become more active contributors in their community. So this is something I'm really excited for. It's building on our Teen Squad work and really saying, how can we build civically minded leaders for our city? How is the library positioned to do that? And so I'm just really grateful for Stephanie Costa, our teen services coordinator, who will be leading that work, Jessica Sweeney, who wrote a great application, and with some great librarians, Claire Doctorman and Jeff Ouellette, who really were helpful in developing the concept. But yeah, one of 10 libraries nationally. And we're amongst a pretty esteemed company: Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Philadelphia, New Orleans, New York, Queens, San Jose, and St. Louis. So I'm really honored and excited to be a part of this cohort.
It aligns nicely with the strategic plan.
Strengthening civic life. Yep, that's exactly right. We're beginning to see the real fruits of kind of that focus for sure. And then a couple upcoming events. Stephanie Costa, who I mentioned before, is leading a IOA at Glendale this fall for free reading tutoring. I've been talking about a desire to really provide this for free reading tutoring that we know is a need. I'm excited to be able to expand this based on the learnings from this project. But if you're interested in learning more, you can go to slcpl.org/literacy. She is still recruiting adult volunteers who would like to be tutors. So if that's something that appeals to you or maybe a friend or colleague, there's an application online to do that. I'm really excited for that program. Runs September through November this coming fall. And then lastly, I just wanted to share this Library Foundation event with you all, and I'll pass along this save the date card that Jessica put together. You all know the Library Foundation has been in existence for about a year, and they are the foundation board is working hard to raise additional funds and raise the profile of the library to just help us do more in the community. This is the first fundraising event that they'll be hosting on the library roof on September 17th. So you all are invited. We would love to have you. If there are people in your circle that you think might be interested in learning more about the foundation or being a part of our philanthropic work, by all means, we invite you to extend those invitations. And there's a more robust invitation with more details to follow. But feel free to mark that on your calendars. Okay, I am going to now turn it over to my colleagues, MSR, to talk a little bit about all the work that they've been doing around capital planning over this last year. So I'll have them introduce themselves here in a second, but I will also make a couple words of introduction as well. And I'll ask my notes, so I'll do this offhand as much as I can. So we've got Jeff here. Were you going to say something?
I
Jeff?
was just gonna say, are you talking about the notes with your slides?
No, the notes specifically that I was going to
Go ahead then.
introduce you all. So, but thank you. If you all, some of you all can't recall, because this work happened beginning close to 3 years ago, where the library, based on the findings from its master facilities planning process, issued an RFP to request help both on doing community engagement work to develop concepts for a number of library buildings and to help us think about and develop the funding mechanisms to be able to get these library buildings built. Kind of priority projects. We knew we needed to rebuild Anderson Foothill Library. There have been, for a number of years, some soil foundation issues that has caused a lot of settling. Our consultants that we've been working with, architects, have told us basically 3 years ago, you got 3 years to do significant remediation. And so that's a really urgent need for us to address that challenge. And the simplest, most cost-effective way to do that is to completely rebuild that facility. Our facilities plan also called for a larger library in that location as well. We also knew we needed to expand and renovate Day Riverside Library, serving the Rose Park neighborhood, a growing community where we are experiencing a lot of growth as well. But that library building, based on its size and some of the amenities we can provide, is just not meeting all of the needs of that community. And then the ballpark neighborhood. We now do have our small ballpark library lab there, but until then it was the only district in the city that didn't have a library, still doesn't have a full-size library. And there was a recognition as well in the master's plan to be able to have a significant presence in that community as well. We also engaged MSR to help us think about this main library building as well. I've talked to you all about this a little bit. This is a building that was designed in the 90s, built in the early aughts, just when kind of the purpose of and the shape of public libraries was changing, right? To not only being repositories of books, but also being these active places for civic life, for community gathering. And so we knew that we needed some help to think through what might be some changes around space for this building as well. So it was MSR that won that contract. They officially began the work, I want to say, 4 months before I officially came on board with the library, and kind of got going in earnest with them in January 2024. Fast forward this last year, in addition to all the community engagement we've done around strategic planning, has been a lot of engagement around talking specifically with those communities around these building projects, and based on the needs, the desires, the aspirations of those communities, what do they want to see from these library buildings? We've also been Pathway, who is essentially a subcontractor of MSR, has been helping us think about the funding mechanisms, both by way of capital campaign with the foundation to help these library buildings come about, as well as the public bonding mechanisms to pay for probably the majority of the funding. Did I miss anything,
No.
Jeff?
I think you've covered it. We have some slides to put up. Hopefully everybody was able to follow that. I would just add as we jump into this schedule and some introductions, that we're really excited about this work. It is really important to the community, to the city, and to us, and we take it very seriously. And of course, it comes with right-sizing budgets and with the funding, and that's something that doesn't always happen. And so we've been really excited to be able to work through those two things together. So Kate, you want to walk us through that schedule a little bit? Sure. Oh,
I'm gonna,
Do you want to go back to the schedule, or do you want to
Yeah.
keep on going?
we could do introductions. Maybe we start with introductions. So
let's do
Tracy,
that.
why
Thank
don't you jump in
Yep.
with the introduction of our firm?
Yep. All right, great. Thanks, everybody. Good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to share an update about our work with the library. We're so grateful, as Jeff said, for this opportunity to work with the city library. We really appreciate all the time, energy, and just, really thoughtful contributions from Noah, the executive team, the managers, and the staff all along the way. It's been a terrific experience for us and a lovely partnership. I'm Tracy Lesneski. I'm partner and CEO of MSR Design and library practice leader. Because we've only met a few of you during the process to date, I'd like to just quickly introduce our firm. MSR Design is a women-owned and women-led national design firm. We have studios in Minneapolis and Salt Lake City. Jeff is obviously in Salt Lake. Kate and I are in Minneapolis. Thanks for accommodating the virtual meeting today. While our practice spans many project types, you can go to the next one, including higher education, housing, workplace, and such. Well over half of our work every year is focused on libraries. We work with libraries of all scales, from small community libraries to major urban systems like yours. We're also deeply engaged in the profession, the library profession, through committee leadership and research and thought leadership with national and international library organizations. And that gives us a broad view of both the opportunities and the challenges that libraries are navigating. And it helps us translate what we're learning across the library profession into built environments that support the services that libraries want to provide and the communities that they serve. Noah already touched on the broader team. National library expertise is just one part of what your project required. We carefully assembled our team to bring that deep expertise with local knowledge of Salt Lake City's communities, its financial and construction landscape, the realities of delivering projects here in Salt Lake City. And throughout the process, we've been working closely with the Pathway Group led by Holly Yoakum. Holly and her team have helped identify potential funding strategies, including, as Noah noted, the supporting the work to establish your foundation. Placeit, you may not have heard of yet. They partnered with us for some of the community engagement, specifically leading a model building workshop in each community. Their approach helps break down language barriers and uncover the priorities and the values of community members in ways that traditional surveys or other kinds of approaches often can't. CCC provided our cost estimating expertise, helping us to understand the financial implications of the concepts as they were developing, serving as a touch point along the way these last several months, and informing the overall project budgets, which we'll talk about later. And finally, last but not least, certainly joining me today are MSR design principals and experienced library architects who've been deeply involved in the work every step of the way. Kate and Jeff, do you want to just say hello?
Hi.
I'll go first. Hey, everyone. Good to see you virtually and look forward to hopefully meeting you in person sometime.
And Jeff? You've
Yeah.
already met, maybe?
I said hi, and
Okay.
yeah, good to be here. I've met many of you before, so.
Great. All right, I mentioned community engagement. Our firm believes that the best projects begin with listening deeply to the people that they'll serve. So that means not just understanding the physical context of a building and its site, but also the cultural context that should inform its design. That's why the projects on this page all look different from one another, even though they were all designed by the same firm. We don't impose a predetermined style. We uncover each project together with our clients and their communities. And that helps to create places in which people can see themselves and buildings that become magnetic draws in their communities. And you'll see what we mean by that as we walk you through the concepts for each location. So our approach to community engagement is to cast a wide net and to use multiple engagement methods. We want to reach as diverse a cross-section of the community as possible, and especially try to get input from people who may not be regular library users or vocal library supporters. For your project, we held the model building workshops that I mentioned, led by Placeit at each location. They were well attended and really very fun events. We also created dot boards for dot voting and written comments. They were in the libraries and at locations around the city where we could reach people during their daily routines. We supplemented that work with an online survey. We had workshops with staff and leadership and a focus group with local nonprofit organizations. So good, broad, deep feedback into what is important to your community. We then carefully analyzed what we heard. We looked for recurring themes across the different forms of engagement and then considered that input alongside the library's strategic goals as those were developing along a concurrent path. Together, that work shaped the building program and the priorities for each location. And Kate and Jeff are going to present the concepts, and they'll point out some of those things that we heard from each community as we go. So Kate, I'll turn it over to you for Anderson Foothill to start.
Actually, it'll be Jeff.
Sorry.
Jeff, let me know if you want me to change slides.
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, I'll let you know when to change it. Just to give you a little bit of an overview. So as we go through these 4 projects, you're going to see a little bit of an idea of some inspiration for the concepts. You're also going to see some a floor plan-ish, right? It's not a full floor plan, but it identifies some of the key components. And then you're going to see some diagrams and then some renderings that we have developed with the library. And so, and then the other piece is a little bit of the specifics. Tracy mentioned the overall of the community engagement, and we're going to, because we did track for each area, the community engagement, there are things that came out of each specific community engagement. So, and because we're wanting to incorporate those ideas into the things that are for each of the different branches. So with the Anderson Foothill, if you go to, so here's the community engagement on Anderson Foothill. And you can see the tracking over to the left. We did some surveying in addition. We had 195 responses to survey in addition to the dot boards and the other outreach. But the top 3 things that came out of Anderson Foothill were, we would love to have a coffee shop as a part of the library, as a place to be, as that 3rd place. We'd love some outdoor space for study, right there in the foothills, looking up to the mountains, the little amphitheater that looks into the creek, just beautiful opportunities there. And people already, and then creative lab access as well. And so those were the 3 main things. And so as we move to the next slide, this is what we started to look at, just from an organizational point of view of really starting to terrace the building up from the creek And then also to look at how it comes to that point. This is a very tricky site. Just to point out really quickly, like there's about a 16-foot grade change from Foothill Boulevard down to 2100. And there's also that same grade change going the other direction, right? So that bottom kind of left corner is this low point, and the kind of point at the top, that's that high point. So, so we're really looking at the terracing that takes advantage of all those things. So if you go to the next slide, we're looking at 3 different levels, and you'll see that the first level is really the parking. Increasing the parking on that site is really important, as I'm sure you know, even with the shared parking with the church next door. And so putting that parking structure also has some impacts. The reason this building needs to be replaced is because of some soil, the sinking from the soils. And so having to excavate out and get down to good soils anyway, putting a parking structure in is a good way to use those funds very efficiently. And then you can see here, and I won't go through all of the details on the floor plan, but you can see up towards the top on that point, very visible to the community, a cafe, a patio, the children's area that looks out towards the creek, and then the community room that's also out towards the creek, a courtyard that connects with that creek area, and then on the upper level, the adults that look out over that creek, and even a little bit of green roof space. Next. Yeah, quiet retreat. That's kind of what we like to think about. And stay on the next slide. Yeah. As we're thinking about that quiet retreat, these are some of the images, and of that quiet retreat, of being able to sit and think and hear nature. And this is some of the color palette that we started to pull from that experience that somebody might have there. And then there's an additional kind of inspiration slide, right? As we start to think about building materials, what does that mean? And landscape, these wood and, brick is like clay, it like pulls back down into the earth. So looking at these natural materials and color palette. And here's a rendering of what that might look like as you're down on 2100. So Foothill Boulevard is just beyond those trees to the left. Kind of creates a point out front. You can see the cafe and a patio. It's shielding itself from the busy traffic of Foothill, starting to introduce itself down into the community and the neighborhood. And then you can see the main entrance is off of the neighborhood side. Still some great visibility from Foothill, which I think is important. And then the other thing you'll notice is, the car coming out at the very back, right? Coming out of that parking garage, we're able to utilize that. And then the next rendering, we have 2 renderings.
Make a mention to drastically improved accessibility when you think about it compared to where we are now.
Yes.
Coffee shop, obviously hearing loud and clear the community desire, and one that can actually be open before the library opens, which makes it a lot more feasible for a coffee shop to be successful.
Yeah. And here is the view from the creek. With the opportunity to have a plaza and be able to spill out to the creek, and then even kind of maybe get down and access it a little. It's a tricky site with that creek kind of being deep down in there, but looking at ways we can start to pull that, and then some rooftop terrace space that starts to overlook that. And then you also notice kind of the clerestory, right, which are upper windows on that little form that's kind of angled up that kind of mimics the mountains and the foothills behind.
I think this slide also speaks to 2 very specific things we heard from the community around needing large space for children. If you go to Foothill, we just have a lot of kids and families. And sometimes parents expressing like feeling kind of bad for the kind of noise that they generate. So having that kind of quiet space on a whole floor. And then to the left, that large community room. We hit break fire codes, I think pretty regularly on the community gathering space at Foothill. When you think about the large things that we do, like the Lunar New Year celebration. So this gives that community a chance to have that as well as to spill out into the next moments.
So that's Anderson Foothill. Kate, you want to jump into Day Riverside?
Any comments or questions on this before we move on to Dave Riverside? All right. So at Day Riverside, just, as a reminder of why this project, this community has been experiencing a lot of growth. The library has been getting a lot of growth, and the existing building just is not big enough to have the types of large community that are taking place there. So this is a snip of some of the engagement we've done. This is a different question than what we saw for Anderson Foothill. So this asks who are already active users of the library, what would improve your experience? And what was distinct about the responses from Day Riverside from the other branches were actually the top 3 responses, and that was less noise and more acoustic control, separate areas for children, teens, and adults, and more private study and meeting rooms. And these were interesting because anecdotally, what we also heard was families like to use Day Riverside, all together, and people often come with groups of kids and teens and adults. So while everyone wants to have a shared experience, it's important that these different age groups have their own spaces to be loud or to be quiet, and not disrupt everyone else. So because this project is a renovation, the existing footprint off to the left there in gray, and our goal was to really build on this language of the pavilions that are already on the site, and to add a few more, and then to fill in those blank spots with usable outdoor program spaces. Because, this building has such a great site alongside the river there, and the city has been working on improving the bike path and the walking path. And so, reorienting a little bit to have some more along the river, adding additions along the street front there to really boost the street presence. Right now, if you drive past Day Riverside, the building is set back so far from the road, it might be hard to notice. So a large goal of ours was to push the billboard, put really great, exciting programs up in that area, and showcase what's going on in the library to people passing by. And then the thought of that addition at the south was, the existing building has beautiful grounds with really great garden. That being said, the entrance door is quite a long walk from the parking lot. You have to, essentially walk by the staff entry and continue on. And so we heard from people, especially with limited mobility, that having a door a little bit closer to parking would be appreciated. So we're trying to sort of reorient the center of the building with. And so when we look at the plan, there would be a main entrance and a secondary entrance from the river, but those two would be, linked into either entry. You're walking into one space with a service desk right in the middle, so you can easily see staff. And then, a large open area where there are different spaces for adults, children, and teen, but at the center, they all flow together. And then at the ends of those different spaces are where each of those groups can have a little more quiet, or in the case of the children's, they can be a little more loud in the story, and they're further away from everyone else. And the teen computers can be, a little bit further so they don't disrupt adults working on resume, they're gaming. And then the community programs for those large community events. So we have a 200-person community room that can be divisible into smaller spaces, and that spills out onto one. And it's located in a way that it can be used after hours if the rest of the library is closed. So there's still access to restrooms and some smaller meeting rooms there. And when we were talking with the community, just
the idea of bringing in nature from the river, but also weaving together all of the different cultures and experiences of the Rose Park neighborhood came up a lot. So that really informed our palette here. And then again, you know, we want to draw inspiration from the pavilions and the rooftop monitors on that existing building and help really inform our new renovation. So this is standing at the street and the river corner and looking at the new children's area. You can see there are some skylights above you. Off to the right would be a program room for arts and crafts and active programs, a big window on the street frontage so that activity is visible. And then a real connection with an outdoor play space for children right along the river path to, you know, bring nature into that side of the building too. Any questions about this one before we move along to ballpark? All right.
Maybe I'll just make mention too around ballpark before we dive in. I think I shared with you all this, but you know, as we think about bonding, those two that we just talked through, those are our priorities. Ballpark, you know, we've been excited to have conversations with the city around ballpark next development, but we understand, given that the proposed library build would be like the third phase of the development of that site, that we're probably a little ways out from this building actually being constructed.
Yeah. And so as we jump into the ballpark, the community engagement that we did there really pointed out that the creative lab access, and I think that's a tribute also to the success of the presence that you now have there and what the great work that they're doing, that they want more of that kind of stuff. Right? And then, you know, bookstore style displays, books and materials to browse. I think they're also anxious to get more of that. And then also coffee shop was another important piece of, we want a place where we can kind of hang out and be, which works well when done correctly. So moving on. So I think this merits taking a little bit of time to help you understand a little bit about what's going on in case you're not fully familiar with the ballpark development plan. So you can see the piece kind of on the left that says ballpark. That's the existing grandstand for the ballpark along the first base line. That piece is going to be preserved. The piece behind home plate and on the third base line is going to be demolished. And there will be a hotel in that location, turning West Temple essentially into a festival street along that area. They want to maintain a big portion of the field for playing fields, and it could be used for concerts or other things, using the stands as a way to be able to look down onto the field. So that gets us over to the right side. There's a fire station that happens that is currently located right on the corner where you see the ballpark library. And this is what Noah was alluding to a little bit. That fire station has to be, a new fire station has to be built just down the block. And then that fire station has to be demolished. Then that makes way for the library, plus everything else that's going on. So the timing of it is a little different. But there's also a parking structure that would service both, you know, the library and the general area there. That would be on the city's part of what the city is doing, not what the library has to do. So then you see the ballpark library right there on the corner of 1300 South and Main Street, kind of a very nice urban corner. So if we go to the next slide, here, as we've started to diagram this, we've looked at this park edge that kind of goes into that open space, and then that civic edge. So there's these two really important edges that happen with the design of that, and that impacts some of the design work that we've been doing. So if we move to the next slide, you'll see here, we're looking at a 2-story building. It's kind of a long and narrow site the city has provided us with. But you can see those two entrances on this lower level, the main entrance coming in off of that urban corner, and the secondary entrance that allows you to connect. And we even can see this as kind of this circulation path that pulls you through the building from the urban edge, from some of the neighborhoods that are on that northeast side, right through the building into the kind of community park area. And then on the upper level, we have this open to below space. But then we have these, some staff space, but then meeting rooms, community room, and rooftop terrace. And with the idea that that space can be open after hours or even available for community meetings. And you can see that you could come in the main entrance. There would be the ability to section off the rest of the library so you can't get in, but you still have access to the restrooms and to be able to go upstairs. So if we go to the next plan. So here's some imagery. We started to pull from the ballpark a little bit. The red from the stitching on the baseball, the idea of this urban environment. If we go to the next one, some materiality, thinking of this as much more of an urban kind of grit than as a part of kind of this transition to the west side. Next. So here's the rendering. Let me just walk you through just a little bit on this rendering. You can see this kind of reddish piece where the people are walking through. That's kind of that connection from one entrance to the other. And then off to the left, you're starting to see the children's area that connects out to the green space and to the park. Up above, you're seeing a balcony where you're going into those places that the community meeting room, and then also accessing a rooftop garden. And then also being able to see that there's a ceiling element that kind of pulls you along, and then the books and the browsing off of both sides. And it's probably not very apparent, but I just have to add this in, that screen that's on the outside that's creating the shading along the right side, kind of up above. Those are little motifs of baseball fields that become an abstraction, but as you discover in the building, you're like, oh, there is a connection back to that. So any questions or comments?
A wood piece around the foothills.
Yeah, I didn't explain that. This kind of wood element, you see this wood element along the ceiling, and then some wood slats along that stair create this little piece, but then there's this kind of main element. And that the geography or the undulation of that wood is actually taken from the topography of the Salt Lake Valley. It's an abstraction of that. So it actually also connects you back to this is, where we're at, where we live. This is a part of who we are. Okay. On the main.
All right, last but certainly not least is Maine. And I think the timeline for this project, and Noah can add to it, is probably fuzzier than either other three. And we wanted to look at this building because, while it does seem new, it is almost 24 years old. It's in incredibly good shape. It's a very high quality building, but over the past 24 years, library services have really gone through a huge transformation across the country, and community needs have shifted. So, taking a fresh look at this 240,000 square foot building was really a great jumping off point for this concept.
Yeah, I'll
We
just
got
add
a
before you
lot.
dive.
Oh, go ahead, Noah.
I'm sorry, Kate. I'll just add real quick too, just to underline, we are not quite sure when we will be in the position to make some of the capital improvements we're talking about. We have some thoughts around engaging local philanthropy around some of these projects. But of all four, as Kate mentioned, this one's probably the least clear in terms of the timeline and some of the funding mechanisms to allow for this work to happen. So all that to say, there's been different pockets of Maine staff that have been involved in this work. As we reveal this to the public, it'll be news to a lot of library staff here, but we're not proposing making any of these changes here in the near term. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
You're just good. So in our online survey, we got a whopping 621 responses to Maine, which was, wonderful. And the top 3 were more outdoor space for reading and studying, which is great because there's a beautiful new rooftop where all of that can happen. More creative lab space, and a lot of the comments around that acknowledged that space is there, and there was a desire to, have even more programming and more elbow room. And then a coffee shop again. So all things that are already present in the library. And so we paired what we heard from the public with some extensive input from staff. So we had a number of workshops with staff who are in the building every day to understand both the library's aspirations and then also some of the issues that are just happening within the space that could be easily addressed with a reorganization. And reorganization was the name of the game here. So we're not coming at this as you should renovate the entire main library. Not at all. It's in good shape. The building functions well. However, it really would benefit from a reorganization and targeted renovations. So sometimes that may just mean adjusting library shelving and furniture. Sometimes that, may mean renovating a room here or there or larger portions of the floor. But what we think would be helpful is, it's a very large building. And so as a member of the public, if each floor had programs organized by a theme, it would help people understand when they come in intuitively where they need to go. So if you walk into the first floor and all of the, easy to use, quick stops, the holds, and meeting with a staff person and new books are all there, that kind of feels right. A lot of the safety issues and the behavior issues that happen in the building right now are because different people are doing 2 different activities that, while neither are necessarily bad, when they happen right next to each other, it can cause some friction. So this reorganization of the building with active activities and playful activities on lower floors, and then having things get a little more calm, a little more quiet as you go up, we think would just help people understand the correct behaviors in each location. So we'll walk through floor by floor and give the highlights. On this lower level, this space right now has the restrooms for the first 2 floors. And so if there are not people in the meeting rooms and auditoriums, a lot of time the only users down in that lower urban room are people going down there for the restrooms where there are no staff and it's hard to monitor them. So one intervention would be making those restrooms used only for those who are using the rentable meeting spaces and putting a new set of restrooms on the floor up above. Also, when people rent these meeting spaces, a piece of input that the library hears all the time is, we have 300 people coming for a full day of meetings. Do you have a space where we can all sit down and have lunch together? And right now the answer is there is not that space. So we would look at carving out space from the Friends bookstore and some staff areas and creating a large conference gathering space that would seat 300 people at banquet tables. Again, I think it makes that lower floor function better for the library. And certainly the Friends store and staff spaces can fit elsewhere in the building fairly easily. So as we go up a level, you may or may not be aware that the city has a master plan for Library Square. So we have a bit of a fuzzy image of that here, but we just want to keep in mind that any work that happens on this floor really needs to happen in concert with the city's plan to make sure these things are going together. So as we laid out this level, go forward. Oh no, our level 1 plan is incorrect. we're gonna backtrack and use this. Apologies, everyone. As we look at the main level, our thought was to stick a cafe in the very corner right by one of the major entrances. So right now that coffee shop is inside the library proper, which means it can't open up early in the morning. And when they would get all of that great business. So by having that cafe on the corner, they could have their own entry. It would bring some liveliness to the plaza area and, you know, more importantly, allow that tenant probably to stay in business for a bit longer. The other thought here is moving the service desk closer to the front door. So when you walk in, you're, you know, immediately greeted by a staff member. You know where to go if you have questions. And it makes that entryway a little more monitored feeling. And then in the upper corner there, we've got teens in that zone. And so teens like to be in a spot where they can kind of see people and be seen. It also will help us, you know, buffer them a little bit acoustically. And they're very near the staircase that would take their younger siblings and parents down to the children's area. So again, if family members need to be on separate levels, they're at least, you know, fairly close to each other. So we will fix this before we send you all the presentation. As we move up to level 2, this floor now becomes the community studio. So all of the programming that's about creating and making vibrant, active programming spaces and art gallery all moves here. So the gallery moves from a very quiet and closed experience happening on the upper floor and really becomes part of the collection and browsing experience in the middle of this space. So anyone coming to the library has a really good opportunity to bump into the items being showcased here. And it's on the same floor where other people are, you know, creating things actively. And part of the thought behind putting the creative studio on this floor was to just bring greater visibility to it. So not only is it visible from inside the building, but in that corner there, it's really visible from the street and anyone walking by the library. And in keeping with that idea, on the 3rd floor, the Commons, a new business center would be in that same corner of the building. Again, very, very visible from the street and visible from inside. So this floor would be about having, you know, entrepreneurship programs, and it's spaces for if you have your own business and you need quiet meeting rooms to take meetings, you can come here. Or if you need help from library staff on how to start a business or how to use a special type of database, you can come here and use computers in a way that's, you know, maybe different from all of the computers elsewhere. And then those 3 org circles in the center, the thought there is that there could be dedicated spaces for library partner organizations, either to meet for, you know, a certain number of hours a day, or they could be used for co-working if they're rented out again, say every Tuesday, there's an organization there. But that you know, work isn't happening somewhere you can't see it. And if they're meeting clients, it's very visible and people know where to go and they can be found. So this floor, it's you know, not as lively as those lower 2 floors, but there's still a good bustle of activity and people working together and collaborating. And then on level 4, this is the reading room, and a majority of the fiction and nonfiction collections could be housed here, as well as the quiet reading room and special collection. And this is the floor for people who do want that quiet, more traditional library experience. Looking at the crescent wall, we would plan to raise the glass rail all the way up to the ceiling so that can be open to the public again, and people can study in that zone. And then in the staff bar, we would create a second silent reading room that would be open to the public, but also available for events that are happening on the rooftop that need a rain location, just in case of inclement weather. That room could really do double duty for those occasions. And if you remember the public comment, the highest request was for outdoor reading areas. And so, that can definitely happen with the library square work. Outside, there's the rooftop that has just been redone. That's lovely. But we thought, what if that really great boardroom you're all sitting in right now wasn't there? And this level, you got off the elevator and the staircase and you could see right to the terrace, and the public would have a larger space to sit inside, but with an outdoor view. Something to consider. And we can find another location for the boardroom within the building. But again, just trying to, make more of the space open to the public with that beautiful rooftop. And so here's a corner, just a diagram of the outside showing how that point of the building would have really great programs, showcasing the different exciting activities happening on each of these floors. And then this would be a view on level 2 of that creative studio. You can imagine having a teaching kitchen that's really open to the rest of the space. You can manage acoustics. It can be used for teaching classes. You could have a painting class there that uses the sink to clean up. People could sit at those tables and study or work when there's not a program happening, but that it brings a new type of activity to the library that's not there today. And as Noah said, the reorganization, some of these things take a little more effort to do, but they can, be done as your priorities dictate, kind of one at a time over a length of time. Now we'll get to the fun stuff. Tracy.
Thanks, Kate. The fun stuff, the cost. So as we think about the context of putting a price tag to these projects that we've just described, despite, what some of those images maybe suggested, we don't have fully designed buildings yet. So what we've done is develop conceptual estimates that are based on the proposed building program and square footage that we've reviewed with you, generated narratives that describe the quality that's necessary for a heavy use public building, describe the nature and extent of work at each of the library locations, and consider the construction market conditions. We've also made sure to convey unusual existing conditions like the Anderson Foothill shoring work. And we've also included healthy contingencies to account for the level of uncertainty at this early point in the design process. This slide is showing how it takes more than just the construction costs to deliver a successful project. So the budgets are accounting for broader costs required, like design and engineering fees, furnishings and equipment, technology, 1% for art, security, testing and inspections, and the soft costs that are listed there, such as moving costs and surveys and geotechnical reports. So all of this comes together to create a project cost, anticipating the full cost of delivering a building that can be opened and used. The concepts that Kate and Jeff presented reflect the programs and the priorities that emerged from community engagement, the conversations with library staff and leadership, and the library's strategic goals. And they represent what we think each project should aspire to achieve. I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay, so for Anderson Foothill, that cost is $49 million, and that's in 2031 dollars. That's to account for executing consecutive projects and not concurrent projects. I'm not sure what kind of conversations you've had to date. And so what this allows us to achieve is the 32,300 square foot library. It is a new building, as mentioned, 2 stories, includes that soil stabilization and the underground parking structure that helps to stabilize the soils, as Jeff mentioned, while also adding approximately 32 parking spaces for modest additional cost considering the gain for all of that. So you can see that just to address the soils and the parking, that's fully almost $7 million of that overall cost. For Day Riverside, that accommodates a 25,000 total square foot library, which is about an 11,000 square foot addition. It's a full reset of the existing building. So that means all the mechanicals are updated. Any of the existing conditions that are remaining will be like new. And it also brings in new outdoor program spaces that are more intentionally designed to support the kind of programming that the library would like to be able to do. And that total project cost, again, with all of those aspects included, is $31 million in 2031 dollars. The total cost for ballpark is $42,700,000, and that's again in 2031 for a new 2-story library within that larger ballpark development. That's offering the after-hours access to community rooms and program spaces, and that green roof terrace overlooking the park that Jeff described for 30,000 square feet total. And then main library, as Kate mentioned, these are targeted renovations, reorganizing programmatic areas of the building, and select areas will have new furnishings to better meet the needs of the building and of the services that the library is trying to provide. The costs per floor vary widely, as you can see, between just under $1 million to all the way up to, $7 or even pushing $8 million. And again, it would depend on the level of the project that you decided to undertake per floor. But if you did all of the improvements that Kate kind of gave a highlight about for each floor, the total project cost is right around $27 million, again, in 2031 dollars. Tyler, do you want to take us through this?
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. So by way of context, the library in the history of facility projects has relied on 2 sources, essentially. One is operational revenue and then saving up, like we did for the roof. That all came through our operational property tax revenue. There, of course, is bonding. So this building was built through a GO bond, Marmalade and Glendale through bonds as well. And the strategy that we're approaching is fun. I appreciate MSR calling the costs the fun part because it's a little bit of Tetris, right? We're taking these pieces and making sure that we're maximizing the financial space or financial capacity that we have. So focusing here on the 2 immediate projects, that of Anderson Foothill and Day Riverside. If we were to fully, if we were moving forward with the full design of those 2 facilities, it would mean an $80 million bond. The cost to service that debt or to pay the principal and interest teacher would be about $6.7 million. And the average monthly increase to residents' property tax bills would be just over $7 per month. Okay. And that's using some figures that the city recently did a property tax increase. So those are pretty current. As we look at the balancing act, right, not just operational revenue and property tax, with bonding capacity as well, but also really building out that 3rd leg of a stool in philanthropic development. We feel more comfortable asking the community to move forward with a $56 million bond. It's a 30% reduction in each scenario, but we don't want to give up 30% of those builds, right? There's a lot of really neat features and benefits for the community there. The bond would be at $56 million, 4.6 million per year in debt service. And the average monthly increase to resident property tax would be $5.56. That's just under the $6 per month that the county just recently. Where does the gap get made up? That would be in partnerships and philanthropic donations, right? And I think that the great work that MSR has done and the community input really shows support for getting somewhere closer to those fully realized community libraries, but a little bit of work to figure out there. So any questions about the funding piece then?
So does that mean the capital campaign, we need to raise $24 million?
That's what it means. Tricia.
Over what period of time?
It would depend on the timing of the overall project. And it's, I think we'll be pretty sober-minded here in saying that's more than we anticipated to raise.
Yeah.
For a new foundation. But I also would say though, is we have a meaningful gap here. That is, Tyler used the language of fully realized community library. The initial buildings without a reduction that you all just saw is what the community is asking for. All of these concepts are based on what the community is asking for, and the square footage is based on what the master plan actually said is required for a library. So that's what we want to build. That means there's a really fantastic opportunity for local philanthropy to get us there. It's not feasible or reasonable to ask for Salt Lake City residents to bear the entire cost of what we're talking about here, but we do think it is feasible and possible for local philanthropy to make up the difference. We're talking with a number of prominent foundations in the area around naming opportunities, which could make that happen. We've got a large and growing list of prospects that the foundation board is working on around other opportunities to be able to engage around philanthropy. And, for Day Riverside as an example, there's other potential ways of working with the city around if there's interest in developing other parts of the site, potentially for other community needs like affordable low-income housing, that could also potentially provide opportunities to help pay for the fully utilized library.
So let's maybe way out into the weeds, but I'm curious if there is any way to calculate economic return of libraries to use that as part of their selling point, as a pitch. Yes, that's a much better word. Yes, as a pitch to show, hey, if we do this, this is the potential economic return back to the community.
Absolutely, Paulina. Yeah, for sure. And in fact, there's some really Urban Library Council, who I mentioned earlier tonight, they've done some really fantastic studies that speak specifically to here's what the measurable social return on public library buildings are for the community. And you're absolutely right. That will be part of our pitch to the community for sure.
So you're saying 24 million is not out of the realm of possibility?
It's gonna be so good, it doesn't sound like that much.
Noah, did you still want to show the impact of if you were staying with that cost reduction to the buildings?
To see, Tracy. Yeah.
Okay. So we have just for each of these libraries, we didn't reorganize the interior completely, but just to give you a sense of the scale of what's lost by reduction of a third of the budget. In the case of Anderson Foothill, going from 49 million down to 34.5, again, escalated to 2031. The reduced scope library is 22,000 square feet, which essentially means we're losing that entire top floor. We would have to then eliminate the program room that's up there, shrink the community room a bit, reduce the study and meeting rooms quantity a bit in order to be able to accommodate moving the adults back down to that main level. So we'd still get the increased accessibility, the parking and access would be improved, but we would lose that top floor, that treehouse perch that Jeff was describing. So it's not insignificant what we're talking about here.
And
go ahead.
the percentage of what's underground increases drastically, right? Because we
That's right.
we still have to do do that significant parking improvement, so that just becomes a much bigger part of the overall cost.
You got it. Yep, that's right. And then for Day Riverside, reducing costs by a third means essentially cutting the amount of square feet that we can add to the building in half and eliminating the program room and the story time room. We would also need to make that community room a little smaller, again, to absorb that adult space back into the available footprint. And we'd need to reduce the number of study and meeting rooms. And again, these were high demand aspects from the community input that we've been hearing, just more places to meet and study. We'd still be resetting the building for another generation of use, and we'd still be gaining about 5,000 square feet, as well as more intentionally designed exterior spaces, but we'd lose some exterior program space. So I think these diagrams show how reaching the lower budget numbers for each project would require some really hard choices about each building area, the scope, the program, and in some cases, those community priorities are, aren't able to be included. So the options can provide a way forward, but they also make clear what would be lost or deferred along the way. I don't know, Noah, if you wanted to add anything to that.
No, I'll just say, I mean, it is, I think you all see the numbers in terms of how sobering they are. I think that's a reality, and I think that was my feeling when I first saw them. And I hope they should feel a sense of duty to deliver the libraries to these communities that they deserve. That's how I feel. So that's going to be some work, but I think it's something we can do.
What are next steps?
I don't know if we have a lot of next step slides. Do we have next step slides related to timing? So maybe, Tyler, could you we can talk a little bit about timing in terms of our engagement with the city council around bonding scenarios, maybe, and some of the dollars that we've already had approved by you all to be able to get going on some of these projects. And I can talk a little bit about the philanthropic.
Before we go to the next step, Charlie, did you have another question?
It's okay.
Okay.
So we've worked closely with the city treasurer's office and finance department, the city. They have the relationships and frankly, the borrowing authority that we'll rely on for these projects. So they've received the $56 million figure to cost out with financial and bond counsel to see how that would shape out. We have also included in the FY27 budget funds to move forward with the construction documents and design elements. Those are costs that would be reimbursed by whatever bond occurs, but that'll allow us to get moving forward. Some level of decision will need to be made, right? As to, are we talking about the smaller designs or the larger ones, right? So we're not asking for two different designs completely, but that's moving forward nicely. So there will be discussions with city partners, city council staff, make sure that the city council is aware of what's going on. We've been talking about pieces of this along the way, right? In the last two budgets, we received multiple briefings on there, but it's helpful to bring them up to speed based on what we're looking at currently and in the context of what the city is doing with property tax increases this year or possibly in the future as well.
On the philanthropic front, we'll share more details as we have to share them. We have made a submission to a local family foundation for what could be a naming gift opportunity with the Day Riverside Library. So that's already been submitted. And, these large gifts do take quite a bit of time and quite a bit of process. There's two other prospects that we have approached and begun conversation with in regards to the Anderson Foothill Library. So the ball's moving forward. We are by no means on the home stretch, but there's some real opportunity out there that we're moving things forward with.
Any other questions?
just think in the context of the city redesign and maybe getting this power district and the new ball team and everything, we don't want to stick the Riverside. Like, we got to be as invested as the rest of the city can be forward motion for investing in our west side.
For sure.
Thank you, Tracy and team.
Thank you.
Thanks, MSR.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Guys.
This will be the end of our agenda. I entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Sarah, are you still with us?
Lost her.
Anyone opposed?
No.
Okay. Oh. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Slow, huh? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay, that sounds great. She's lovely. You'll like her. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah, I saw the article in the paper. Thank you.
Oh, congratulations.
That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like,